Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation. We're about at the scheduled start time, so we'll go ahead and kick off today's presentation. But before I do that, I'll just cover a bit of housekeeping information. I know I relayed this just a minute ago, but for anyone who just dialed in, we will be recording today's presentation. So if you're looking for a copy of the presentation, keep an eye on your inbox in the days following the event for a link to the recording. That way you have it for review or to share with a colleague. It's going to be a great resource for you. Also, if you have any questions for any of our presenters, please direct them via the chat and or Q&A window. We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions as time allows after the event. So with that being said, thank you for joining us for today's Top 5 Problems Identified with Stratusphere UX webinar. Today we're joined by Jason E. Smith, our VP of Product Marketing, and Chris Walker, our Senior Solutions Consultant, but more importantly, one of our gurus and subject matter experts for Stratusphere. So they're going to go ahead and take us through the presentation. I think Jason's going to start.
Thank you, Ray. And I'm so glad to be in front of all of you today, talking about 5 problems identified with Stratusphere UX, and pleased to have Chris Walker here. And it's always refreshing to get notes from the field. And you don't get any more real than that when you think about a technical webinar. And Chris is actually in the field today. He has found a quiet conference room and is delivering notes literally from the field today about these 5 problems that you can identify with Stratusphere UX. Before we get to that, I want to level set you. If you don't know Liquidware, we have a suite of adaptive workspace management. What do I mean about that? Our products work across any way that you deliver Windows, any way you're going to deliver Windows, even tomorrow or the next day or next year. So you can switch out the parts of your Windows Enterprise, such as Windows 7 to 10, or from Citrix to VMware, or VMware to Citrix, or to try Microsoft WVD, which will soon be generally available, Amazon Workspaces. You can do any of that and still have a seamless adaptive workspace management solution that will follow the user no matter where they go. And that is full user environment management, a profile that will populate that new environment, even works with new Microsoft technologies like FSLogix to hydrate profiles like that, give you full user environment management across every user, every desktop, and context awareness anywhere you log in. FlexApp, application attachment through layering, being able to bring in applications dynamically into a Windows environment, even works with other technologies such as Citrix app layering and others to bring in just applications just in time, delivered specifically to that Windows desktop based on the task at hand for that user. If that means that it is someone in the human resources department that has an application that is specifically needed for them, that application would show up only in that department. And it is attached, so it doesn't affect the base image and the way you manage base images. So it lessens base image management and makes it easier to update applications across, and follow that application can follow the user from Windows 7 to 10 to any version of 10 to server without having to repackage it. I know it sounds mysterious, but it actually seamlessly works across all those and follows the user, package applications once. Today, we're going to be talking mainly about Stratusphere, and Stratusphere is our visibility, monitoring, and diagnostic solution that will work across any Windows desktop for any user to follow their user experience and tell you what the difference is across multiple desktops even. So if you're planning for a new desktop, or if you are coexisting a mixed Windows OS, Stratusphere can tell you the unique user experience metric for each desktop, and also let you dive in deeper and deeper into any kind of root cause for anything that is causing performance degradation into any of those environments, to be able to get you up and running quickly. And then when you're trialing new desktops, to help you grow and scale. So it shows you the bottlenecks where you can upsize, whether it's the performance of the machine through CPU or RAM, or to add more storage. It can tell you where all those bottlenecks may be occurring, so you can grow and scale your Windows deployment and prove that the new desktop that your users are moving to is better than your old desktop, and then give you, like we said, root cause analysis for any performance degradation occurring. All of our solutions work across virtual desktops, physical desktops, and new cloud-based desktops such as Amazon Workspaces or Microsoft WVD or Nutanix or any of those. So that is our adaptive workspace management in a nutshell. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk about just briefly some of the use cases where these solutions are used. and that would be in, Chris, if you could move on to the next slide. I may be seeing a delay. We'll see some of the use cases. So in the education market, we are used for students to be able to roam across desktops, across campus, and to be able to do dynamic printing, for example, that context awareness through our user environment management solutions, or to lay down applications. If they're in a computer lab on one part of campus, they get their science applications into their Windows session. That very same base image can be leveraged in another department when that same student or a different student goes over to the math department and has applications show up for them. So in K through 12 education or in higher education like universities, we have many customers in there. In healthcare, if you go back to that first area on this slide, you would have doctors that are roaming about and connecting to different desktops, like a Citrix desktop dynamically, and they need settings to follow them. So again, printer management in there, we can work across to a layer to attach applications as cumbersome as Epic in a healthcare environment. And to monitor the user experience no matter how they're logging on there with Stratusphere. In the manufacturing area, we can be running in the executive's office or in management's office. So when they're in their office, they see the desktop and they have settings that follow them across there in the applications that they need for computer-aided design, for example, or in applications as complicated as AutoCAD could be layered into those environments. And when they go down to the shop floor, they have a totally different experience when they log on to that machine, and they have just the things that are needed there, and we can monitor those between the. So those are a few of the use cases. There's more here on the screen than that. And again, we work in these environments. Don't think about us just on virtual desktops, but for all your Windows desktops, to provide a consistent user experience metric across those and to have applications follow them no matter where they go, where you can switch out the desktops at any time. So we're not in a silo for any one group, because you have tools from Citrix or VMware that arguably do some of the things that we do just in those environments, but Liquidware solutions are adaptive and they work across all desktops. So you can move to the latest and greatest desktop and have zero impact on user productivity as they move across. All right, Chris is going to pick it up from here. Chris Walker, again, like I said, notes from the field. He's going to tell us those 5 problems identified with Stratusphere.
Yep. Thanks, Jason. So yeah, as Jason talked about, I deal with a lot of our largest customers across healthcare, insurance, legal, manufacturing, banking, financial, and been working with in this industry for too many years, using Stratusphere for the past 8 with Liquidware Labs. And these problems that I find across the different environments are generally the same. That some of them are relatively simple things that we just forget about, like last time the machine booted, things like that. But as we go across our different customers, so we want to do a session with our customers and our potential customers to kind of say, hey, watch out for these things. Stratusphere will identify these very quickly in the environment and help you resolve them as fast as possible. So number 5, what did we find as far as the number 5 top problem in the environment for customers? So for those of you running Citrix, running VMware Horizon, Amazon, or in the cloud, wherever you are, and you're connecting to a remote machine. So we call this remote display protocol. This is your PC over IP, your blast, RDP traffic, RFX, ICA traffic. So this traffic is basically from the end user sitting in the field. So maybe me sitting in my house when I'm back in my house, connecting to our cloud environment or our Citrix or VMware environment inside our system. And there's several different issues here. There's actually a pretty big topic. One of the biggest ones that my customers ask me is they have remote consultants, developers offshore. We have people that come into our system and do development for us, or consulting, call centers, things like that. And one of the things is the guy working? I know that they're connected to my system. I can see them logged in, but are they actually doing anything? So most of the major protocols have the ability to tell you the session idle time. How much time was he actually active? How much time was he actually moving the mouse, pressing the keyboard, and actually doing work? So just having somebody logged in, and so this is a business driver. I pay these consultants, I pay these developers X amount of dollars. And I mean, I'm down here in Florida today. Yesterday, talked to a customer who does, offsite, North America offsite support services and things like that. And he has contracts with a lot of different people, and he knows they're connected, but he can't tell if they're actually working. One column in Stratusphere, here you go right here, and he's even going to use the API to actually export the data and get it back to the business owners. Next one would be, how much audio traffic are they doing? It's amazing when I go into customers and see how much audio traffic is going across a Citrix line or a VMware line. So we actually break out those channels so I can determine, hey, they may just be sitting there watching CNN or, a movie. They're watching Netflix, which, by the way, I can go look at the browser tab and actually tell you what they're looking at. So this gives me more drill down into those protocols and what are they actually doing on my resources. Because that's 8 gig of audio that this user just pushed across my line. I need to know what that is. I need to know, because that's eating up my resources. Then we get down to the more diagnostics part of it, session latency. So is that normal for his location? So my data center is in Atlanta. I have users in Charlotte, Boca Raton, Florida, DC. So I need to know the latency of each one of these lines, and how much packet loss as well, because packet loss shows that quality of service is not turned on. So if it's a private network and quality of service is turned on, I've got a big issue. If it's going across the internet, that's a little bit different problem. Session latency, a user sitting at their house, and from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., their session latency is 30 milliseconds. Then all of a sudden at 4 p.m., it jumps to 120 milliseconds, and the user is complaining about my cloud system or my VDI system. Well, I can graph and show the user, look, every day, a little bit after 4 o'clock, your latency goes from 30 milliseconds up to 120. There's nothing changing in my environment. What's going on at your house? And they say, oh, yeah, my kids come home. And they start doing Netflix and all this other stuff, doing chat, social media. So we have the data to display, watch, and track all of that information for the remote display connection. What IP address is that user coming from? Did they have the problem when they were in my office? Maybe only when they were on the Wi-Fi in a certain office. So, their remote machine name, IP address they're coming from, how much work are they doing, or they're listening to the radio, maybe doing audio traffic, or it could have been a real world use case. They're doing a Teams or a Skype call. Well, I need to redirect that data and probably put that back on the local machine instead of going through my VDI system. So this is one of the big ones. User connected to my virtual environment and then complaining about, quote, slowness.
Nice.
So one of the many tabs on
so the user is Michael Torian in this case, right?
Yep.
He just sent me a Teams message, said, hey, I was generating traffic for my NVIDIA demo. I was really working.
Yep. So yeah, I picked on one of our SEs. So yeah, just to pick on him, he didn't do 8 gig of traffic. I actually cut up a little bit, just a little bit. Yep. So yeah, I thought this might upset one of our SEs, but hey, we got to eat our own dog food. Stratusphere monitors our systems. We use this to diagnose our platforms. And oh, by the way, yes, Michael Torian, I'm asking, all of you actually doing work?
Good one.
All right. So number 4, machine last boot time. I can't tell you how many times I've been in environments and found out that, hey, you haven't rebooted this machine since February. It's September. You're getting massive calls to the help desk about this problem, and the users are complaining. They got fragmented memory, graphic device. Has anybody ever heard of a GDI object leak? It is a real thing, a graphic device object leak, where an application actually generates more and more GDI objects until finally it runs the machine out of memory, and you just have no choice but to reboot it. But this is a common problem. I've dealt with many customers. One of them was, had 1,000 machines in the Amazon cloud, and they were complaining to Amazon about how bad the performance was. The users were calling the help desk all the time. We installed Stratusphere. Found out, sure enough, half the population up there had not rebooted their machines in 4 months. Now, two things about that. One, what didn't happen? They've got SCCM in their environment pushing out patches for security updates and feature updates and things like that. So for 4 months, those machines did not get a security update. That's very bad. Number two, they also had, the machines had run themselves out of memory. So their memory was fragmented, all this other stuff. The CIO was very upset because when he figured out, hey, why aren't my security updates being patched? So he got really mad at the SCCM guys. Number two, once we did actually implement and get SCCM working properly and stopped allowing the user to push off that update, because the user can just say, nope, I'll do it tomorrow. So once they stopped that practice, their calls to the help desk went down by 60%, because the users, the machines, were no longer had fragmented memory. They weren't paging all the time. High disk I/O, eating up CPU because the memory was fragmented. You got a workstation OS or even a server OS that's being used as a desktop, and it hadn't been rebooted in, I like 30 days minimum. Windows 10, 2 weeks. So my preference on this, depending on the environment, at least every 30 days, those Windows machines should be rebooted at least for one critical reason: security updates. Making sure those machines have the latest Microsoft patches to make sure they're not vulnerable for anything outside of the environment. Believe it or not, I'm preaching really hard on this one. I find it in every one of my customers. Number three, memory usage and paging. So this goes along a little bit with the information about not booting. So users, so I've given you 6 gig of RAM, and you're constantly calling me telling me that you need more memory. I can use Stratusphere to graph that and look at that and find out what applications are eating up all of your memory. Maybe you have an application with a memory leak. So I don't want to get into that page file. I don't want to get in and actually find out that you're writing data. What happens when I use the page file? I'm taking information from RAM, nanosecond access, moving it to disk, millisecond access, and it's the CPU that has to do that. So I'm using the CPU to move information out of memory to disk and causing disk I/O. Now, in a physical machine, it's a little bit harder to fix because you got to go out and add memory to physical machines. But in virtual machine, seriously, this is just a couple clicks. So you want to make sure that your workstations, have enough, or your host would have enough memory or to handle this. If you go and give another 2 gig of RAM to 800 machines, you may run your host out of memory. But paging is bad. You cannot stop it, but I want to mitigate it as much as possible. Don't want if I can give a user 1 more gig of RAM and keep them from paging, I'm saving disk I/O and I'm saving CPU. Can't tell you how many customers I've been into where, hey, we're getting ready to buy this $1 million disk subsystem, going to look at Stratusphere and they're paging like crazy. Then we go look at the host and say, well, you've got plenty of memory on your host. Why don't you bump it all up and give them 1 more gig of RAM? Guess what? They end up canceling that $1 million disk order. Now, our partners don't like that, but at the end of the day, it's not about buying more hardware to fix this is a software problem. Give them a little bit more memory. You reduce pressure on your CPU and your memory simultaneously. So just be careful doing this because you don't want to overload that ESX server. This is probably, this is the number one issue that I find all the time, but not the number one impact. I find this problem in every one of my customers, but not the number one impact from a load perspective. Okay. Number two, graphics hardware acceleration. Okay. Everybody knows a laptop, a workstation desktop, they always have a GPU, a graphics processing unit. Every machine you bought for the past 5 or 10 years has a dedicated video card of some type. Varying different types, varying different capabilities, but every machine has a graphics processor. In VDI environments or virtual environments, virtual machines don't have a graphics adapter. So unless you purchased an NVIDIA card and dropped it in your host, I think AMD has one too. The cloud providers have these offerings as well. Those virtual machines don't have a graphics adapter. So they have to put it back onto the main Intel or AMD CPU to be the graphics adapter. So we look at there's a certain column in Stratusphere called GPU core usage, and I can tell what applications are in hardware acceleration mode. So in the real world, everything's graphical. Your data, your applications, everything's graphical. Applications want to use a video card if they detect it. Now, this is not limited to 3D graphics. 2D graphics also wants to do hardware acceleration. Every computer in the past 10 years has a video card. Why would we not think about this when we move into a virtual environment? A virtual machine, everybody seems to forget, a virtual machine does not have a graphics adapter unless you spent that money to put them in your ESX host. So in Stratusphere, I can actually see core usage. I can see how much thermal temperature, the memory. I can actually help you tune those cards as well because they have different profiles. Do I give a user 1 gig of RAM? Do I give them 2 gig of RAM? What kind of applications are they running? Because if I give a user 1 gig of RAM and they're only using 512, well, if I knock them down to 512, I can get twice the number of users onto that card. So by proper tuning and looking at the applications, I can actually tell you this in the environment per process, which process is using the GPU. And the main one I'm after right there is memory. How much memory is being used by that machine, by that process. Key takeaway from here, if you do not have a vGPU, turn off hardware acceleration. And we'll show you in a minute on our community site. Go to our community site, community.liquidware.com. One of our SEs, Adam Rue, has actually posted out there most of the registry settings to turn it off for Google Chrome, Firefox, Office. If you're in a VDI environment and do not have the graphics adapter, this will get you back 8 to 10% of your CPU on your ESX servers. This is critical. Huge amount of CPU being turned up and used up here trying to make that Intel card act like a graphics processor. Community.liquidware.com, and go check out those registry settings from Adam Rue to help you turn that stuff off. Number one process or thing that we found inside the environment, and this is actually the number one seller, just because everybody understands it, long user login. So everybody understands, when my user logs in, I need to be able to track that. They're complaining about it. But how do I get in and actually diagnose that data? This is a very complex issue. Normally when I'm in the Stratusphere interface, I'm actually talking to the Active Directory guys and saying, hey, why is this domain controller responding slow? So this user is in the Atlanta data center. He's hitting the domain controller that's in Canada. That's not good. Sites and services are messed up. Broken GPOs. What's happening? When is it applied? Machine versus user. So we do track machine boot time in all the GPOs and Active Directory communications, as well as the user data. And then how long does each one of the individual group policies run? So as an Active Directory guy, I write a GPO that does a folder redirection. Okay, it's simple. That's standard Microsoft practice, redirect a desktop to a share. How long does it take it to run? I have no idea. Don't care. It's a standard practice. You can actually see that in Stratusphere. You can tell how long did it take it to run because that's important. If a user's in California, redirecting their desktop to my Georgia data center, that can take a while to do that. Not to mention, it may fail. So I need to know how many times these GPOs are failing in my environment. What if it's a security-based GPO that didn't get applied to turn off the USB keys or keep them from running certain applications? So login breakdown, normally most of my customers comes and says, hey, we got a real slow login. Let's go look at the login process. Then I end up finding sites and services issues, domain controllers that are overloaded. Somebody's given a domain controller one CPU. Don't do that. At least twice a year, I find that problem. Domain controllers need at least 2 CPUs. It depends on the size of your environment, 8 to 12, maybe 24 gig of RAM for domain controllers. Just consult the Microsoft best practices. But this is the number one issue because everybody understands login. We're always trying to get our end users a faster login experience into the infrastructure so that they can get in, do their work, and they're not cumbered by waiting 2 minutes or in some cases 15 minutes to log into the infrastructure. This is the number one issue that Stratusphere solves, but it's mainly because everybody understands login. It's like, I need to go fix this issue. So basically, to sum it all up, number 5, remote display improves the user experience. If I can reduce latency, reduce packet loss, that user is going to have a better experience. Last boot, again, improving the user experience and security. Because when I reboot that machine every 2 weeks or at least once a month, that memory is refreshed. There's not a lot of fragmentation going on, and I've got all my security updates applied. Memory usage and paging, give a little bit, save a lot. Give that user 2 more gig of RAM, you will free up disk I/O and free up CPU on that system, thereby making them a much happier environment. And I'm actually saving money. Hardware acceleration, lower your overhead, save money. If you do not have the offload cards called vGPUs, virtual GPUs, turn off hardware acceleration. You will save money on your ESX host CPU time. Then number 1, again, top because everybody understands login times. This saves time and lowers infrastructure overhead. And it's kind of a weird statement, lowers infrastructure overhead. When I optimize that login time and cut it down from 2 minutes down to 30 seconds, I cut out a lot of CPU actually. I cut out a lot of networking traffic. Things that were going bad. One of my competitors for Stratusphere was installed in the environment. We started doing a login process breakdown. Their process took 45 seconds to run. And I showed it, actually broke it down. So it actually lowers, saves time for my users to log in and out of the environment, and thus actually lower my CPU, my network, my disk I/O by optimizing the login process. So improve user experience is the overall goal. That's why we call it Stratusphere UX for user experience. We're just trying to improve that user experience across the board. I talked about a lot of different numbers in here. On our community site, community.liquidware.com, I've posted and I maintain these documents for the company. It's kind of your cheat sheet. So what should my domain controller response time be? When do I really start to page? What does CPU queue mean? That's all here in these spot check documents. And I have one for physical, Citrix, Amazon. I'm writing one for Azure, Horizon, physical environments. Each one is a little bit different because the hypervisors or things like that. But check out community.liquidware.com under the Stratusphere section and check out my cheat sheet because it will tell you what those numbers should be inside of Stratusphere and help you, focus tighter on that information. Even give some really good blogs and things like that to where to find out data. And Jason and Ray, any questions or thoughts that we run up to?
Yeah, it's really good. I was looking at the audience numbers. I can always tell, when people log in, how engaged they are. And I've only seen the audience numbers go up and up and up. So they like what you're hearing is what that equates to me. And they're learning something. And I learned something today already. We can move to a question and answer part of today's discussion. And we'd encourage you in that chat window right there in the GoToMeeting. Just insert your curious question here, and we'd be glad to get to some of those. I see some of those are coming in. Ray's been monitoring those in the meantime. Ray, do you have? I do see one
sure.
here. Yeah, I see one.
I'll start firing them out. Can Stratusphere show machines that have too much memory and CPU?
Yeah, good question. So we've been talking about in this problem where people weren't assigning enough memory. But I do have a lot of customers that come to me and say, hey, I bought all my users high-end laptops, high-end graphics adapters, gave them 16 gig of RAM, quad processors, solid-state drives. I'm thinking I overspent money. So they're actually using Stratusphere to reallocate those machines because you can graph and see how much memory, how much CPUs are using for these users in virtual machines or physical environments, maybe retier. In the different cloud providers, you got different tiers of machines. So I could turn those machines up and down based on my needs, but I need to be able to prove it. So Stratusphere has all that long-term history, and I can see that Jason Smith in my VDI environment has really only used 4 gig of RAM, and I've given him a 16 gig of RAM machine, and I can prove that to Jason. Jason, you said you need a 16 gig of RAM machine, but you've never been over 4. So I'm going to drop you down to 8 and save myself a little money in my cloud provider. That can be done for a physical or a virtual or a cloud machine. Yeah, all day long.
Solitaire will still run fine with that, right?
Yes, it sure will. Yep, you're good.
All right, so questions are rolling in, and someone asked, I'd like to know more about what paging is. So I think maybe they're looking for a little more clarification on that.
So Windows paging has been around forever, and ever since Microsoft 3.0, or probably before that. But basically what that is, and there's two parts of it. So that's basically when Windows is taking information. So I got a 4 gig of RAM machine, and I get up to 80, 90% of my RAM utilization. Windows is going to take information out of RAM and move it to disk that's not being used, so that other applications have access to RAM, high-speed RAM. And then if it needs it, it will pull that stuff back off a disk and put it back into RAM if that application requests it. And there's two parts to it. There's called soft page faults, which is in RAM, and that's Windows moving things around in memory and optimizing things in memory, and hard page faults. Hard page faults is when an application goes looking for something in RAM, and then it's actually on disk. So it has to move it back from disk back to RAM so the application can use it. But paging is basically the process of taking information out of RAM and moving it to disk. Now remember, RAM is nanosecond access, disk is millisecond. So, big difference in performance speed, plus I got to move it back from disk back to RAM before the application actually uses it.
So if
basically optimization of memory.
If you're tight on RAM on that box, on that ESX server or whatever, you can increase your page size and it'll start using disk. Literally might use a spinning disk, which would be the slowest, right? And so on one hand, user experience might improve a little bit, right? But if you do that too much, the user will start to notice, because you'll get too many resources shifted over to that slow disk, right? And then user experience might suffer.
Yep. Well, for Windows can do swapping, and so can an ESX server can do swapping. The different information, the way you handle it differently for the hypervisor versus the Windows OS. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
All right, we've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to try to keep us moving here and kind of hit them as I'm seeing them. Somebody asked, what is Stratusphere Fit?
Oh, yeah. So there's two parts to Stratusphere. Stratusphere's been around for, 10 years now. Fit is what's called the assessment side. So I want to determine, going into a greenfield environment, and I've got all these laptops and workstations in my environment, and I want to determine if they're a good fit for VDI. Are they a good fit for cloud? So we use Stratusphere Fit. Same data, same agents, just different menus that look at the data in a different perspective. So I do a fit profile to determine, is this machine a good fit for me to move into a Citrix environment, into an Amazon environment, into a WDE environment for Microsoft. So fit is your assessment side, where I'm using it to determine if they're a good fit to move into virtual. UX, on the other hand, is the diagnostic. Go ahead, Jason.
And if you license UX, you get access to all of the fit when you want to use it, right?
Yep.
You may have seen your partner or your integrator use Stratusphere Fit because they have licenses of it to come in and give you some decision support on what you should do for your desktops. Do you want to move a set number of them over to virtual desktops, for example, or cloud desktops? And they may use it on a temporary basis. But if you own Stratusphere UX, user experience, you get all the very deep reports and can do a fitness assessment yourself at any time if you're planning on moving to Windows 7 to 10, for example.
Yep. Do it all the time to move customers into Amazon, Azure, or into Citrix or VMware. You basically need to determine how much CPU memory, disk, and network. If I move these 1,000 users into this platform, how much CPU memory, disk, and network? And by the way, if you're just guessing, you're going to mess up. Stratusphere tells you exactly.
Yeah, I like to say about Stratusphere that it can be used on any type of Windows desktop, but when you're going to something as different as virtual desktops or cloud-based desktops, use it to do it right through a fitness assessment and then to monitor user experience, or you will regret it and you must use it later when you've undersized the environment or you've oversized the environment and you really need to see what the user experience is and why it wasn't set up. So use it now or use it later. That's what I like to say.
I have gone into many customers that were unhappy with their provider, be it virtual or physical, any hardware manufacturer, where they basically said, I think I need 2 CPUs and 4 gig of RAM. And we install Stratusphere and basically figure out why they need more hardware. They have to spend more money, and they weren't happy. They didn't do an assessment up front.
Yep, and we've seen it the other way around too, where they've where they built out and they didn't need it all. They didn't need what they needed
they
at the
spent
time.
Too much.
Yep.
Spent too much money.
All right, so here's another question, and I'm going to kind of summarize this down a little bit. But someone talked about the 30-second login delay as the industry standard, but wondering if that might apply more to smaller, mid-sized companies, and if maybe there were different industry standards for larger companies, and if that's the case, what might that be?
Yeah, as an IT industry around the world, most people shoot for under 30 seconds. That's what I found talking to customers all around the world. Now, if you're in healthcare or legal, they want under 10 seconds. And one of my healthcare providers a couple years ago did a study, and they said if I can shave off 10 seconds off the login time for my doctors, they can see one more person a day. That's huge money for healthcare, because that doctor can now see one more person per day, taking care of more people. So as a worldwide number, most people shoot for under 30 seconds. But if you're in healthcare or legal basically being very picky, I want to turn the machine on and be able to go to my work. So that's being just very demanding. In healthcare, it's all about those doctors and nurses and practitioners being able to see more people during the day.
Right. So we can diagnose that with Stratusphere UX. And you may say that, well, that's crazy. Right now I have a 5-minute log on time. There's no way I'd ever get it back down to 30 seconds or 10 seconds. Or our other solutions like Profile Unity can help you get there, right? Other solutions out in the market can help you get there too. Why are logins slow? A lot of times maybe that's because you're waiting on the roaming profile to load. And so there's technologies out there that fix this, like profile in a disk situation. FS Logix fixes that. We have a profile disk situation that fixes that. We have profile portability that can get very granular and tune that even further and then make it work across Windows 7 to 10. In Profile Unity, we also have policy management that will run much, much faster than group policy preferences, because we do very efficient lookups. We do master lookups one time, and then we assign, everything that needs to assign within seconds. So we can help you with our other products as well to get those login times down dramatically, not only to pinpoint where they are today, but a lot of our other solutions will help decrease login times overall across the board. So decreasing every part of your login, not just the profile part, but the policy pieces as well and lookups.
someone asks, can you measure network I/O demands and consumption in cloud-hosted workload, specifically VDI workload?
Yes, by process, by machine. So Stratusphere, being the agent on a system, very light agent, but I have all the in and out traffic per process and per machine, or you can even break it down per user. So ingress, egress, what is it talking to, even web interfaces. Hey, how much traffic got sent over to Netflix? People watching Netflix. So I can break that apart multiple ways with Stratusphere data.
All right, Chris, I've got a couple questions here that might be related to one another. And that's people that looks like they have Stratusphere UX, and they're looking for some of the information that you called out, like machine last boot time. And someone else asked about, oh, no, the last boot information. It looks like both questions are looking for the same information and where to find that inside the product.
Yep. If you go into the advanced menus, on the right-hand side, the inventory, and you're looking for CID boot. That's our connector ID boot time, basically showing the last time the machine was booted. And that picture that I had in there, so advanced tab under inventory, it'll be on the right-hand side of the screen, and it's basically the CID boot. And under there, you also have hardware, CPU, memory, disk, network, all the details about the machine. So it's full inventory, graphics adapters, everything. But CID boot is what you're after right there.
Okay, here's another one. Can Stratusphere show the last time that certain applications on the VDI have been used / the frequency that a certain is used? Here's an example that they provided. We wanted to know the last time that a certain user logged into Visio. Is that possible?
Yes. It's actually on the fit side. That's a big report called Applications Installed versus Used. It's been in the product since I started 8 years ago. So it can identify, every application installed in the environment as well as when the last time it was used. Even in the advanced inspector, just the web interface, I can drill into a user and say, okay, Visio.exe, show me the last 30 days. Did they use it? Nope. And some of my customers are even integrating that into like ServiceNow or Tableau, and they're going and removing software.
Yep.
So yeah, we do track not only the last time they ran it, but how long it was running, who ran it, on what machine, and with our API, they're pulling that data into other integration systems. They're actually going and removing software, but to free up assets, reclaim licenses.
Yeah, and so we've paid for the deployment, not only Stratusphere, but our entire suite sometimes by saving customers on license fees, and we've also similar use cases for saving money. Chris, you were in a big project where a hospital was at a hospital that they saved tons of money on Windows machines, zombies just running everywhere, right? What I describe as zombie Windows machines that were running and never used.
Yeah, I've got several customers. So, asset management from software is one thing. So being able to pull those assets that, everybody said they need Snagit, but everybody's not using Snagit. It's $50 a piece, or, an enterprise license. But I do have some customers that are doing hardware, basically reclaiming hardware. So I can tell if, somebody's logged in again, and if the mouse and keyboard hasn't been used on that machine. So they're logged in, but the keyboard and mouse aren't being used, so the machine is idle. So they're monitoring these devices, over the course of a couple months. And then if they're not used a certain amount of time, they're turning that box off. They're going and pulling the hardware off the floor. So I'm saving power, heat, maintenance on the machine, and all the software licenses that were on the machine. Stratusphere has paid for that in that particular company multiple times over, especially when you're talking about 20,000 machines and retiring, a third of the fleet.
Right.
And
so you can
Stratusphere has
see
data to prove it.
The benefit, not only your VDI environment, which a lot of people think about us for VDI, for showing all the hidden parts of our virtual environment, but physical environment too. Many of our customers they bring in the physical desktop people into these meetings, and then they deploy Stratusphere on every single desktop for these same reasons. So we would love it if we've got Stratusphere customers on the phone today. We'd love those introductions to those other departments. If you think we can be effective in there, you can reach out to Chris or I on that. We'd love to get introductions like that.
So here's a question, and someone asked, do you have the ability to see within the system process and determine what individual threads are consuming CPU? Then they followed up with, and yes, I mean the system in quotation process where some security monitoring software resides and consumes CPU.
We don't. I mean, you're getting down into basically following threads. I do know the PIDs, like during the login process, but following individual PIDs, I can see what PID started it because I do track the PID of each individual process. That's the process identifier. So I can see what started what. I don't know the communications in between the individual PIDs. It gets very complicated in diagnosing individual PIDs. Stratusphere as a whole, we try to make our agent as low impact as possible. We monitor our own agent. I don't like to see my Stratusphere agent in the top 10, which it never is for most of my customers. So, but we keep adding features and capabilities to the PID, but to the connector ID agent, but we still want to minimize that. And the inter-process communications and breaking that down gets a little complicated. And there's only a certain amount of processes that we're managing. So I probably need to see your environment and see what you're trying to track. Because I did do this for a customer the other day. I think they were running PeopleSoft. So I was actually tracking PeopleSoft from a web interface back to an application processor to the SQL server, and I could see each one of those individual hops and latencies, but individual process inside a machine, that gets a little more complicated. I'd probably reach out to your salesperson or your SE and see if they could set up a time with me to actually drill into your individual issue and what you're trying to do there. So there may be another way I can get that data.
I know we said reach out a couple of times, but you can email any of us at sales@liquidware or info@liquidware.com, and the message will get forwarded to us fairly quickly.
So I think that kind of goes into another question that I saw come through here, and somebody was talking about, what kind of training is available for some of these types of things and resources. And another one, just to add on to this, is you had mentioned some cheat sheets and asking where they could find those.
Yep. So this is one of the resource slides. So liquidware.com. We also have training.com, our community site. And the community site, a lot of the SEs are posting things up there about, hey, how to find an IP address. David posted one, name an IP address for a specific user with login breakdown. FlexApp packaging consoles. I've got my my spot check documents on the community site, as well as there's references to the training. In the next version of our products, there's actually going to be a link as well. So in Stratusphere, you'll be able to drop it down and say, go to training, go to marketing, go to community site. And we do also offer a full professional training as well, where they can come on site or across the internet. It's a full day class just for Stratusphere. The guy pushes every single button. It is phenomenal, but it's a lot of data.
Chris, you want to go back to that training? The community site one more time so people could even log in today. This is a new resource for us. Chris himself monitors this a lot. A lot of our SCs monitor this a lot. You can sign up for obviously no cost and propose a lot of these questions or look for where do I find the resources in there. I didn't see it come up. I don't know if there's a delay. What's the domain to go to, Chris? There we go. community.liquidware.com. So this is only live within the last month and a half, so we'd love to see more people using it so we can communicate exactly the way we are in these Q&As today.
And chances are, if you got a question, other customers have the same question, and you got 30 SCs around the world with Liquidware developers and our support guys that are watching the site to answer your questions too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's a couple questions about SCOM, and can you tell if SCOM agent is running in the background, and also someone asking what our integrations with that are.
Yep. So two things there. So I can monitor any process on the machine. At the end of the day, is it running? Is it not running? Things like that. As far as so SCCM, I actually have customers that use, and we wrote customer reports for them just to alert them when their SCCM agent was not running. But SCCM is a process, and if it's running or not, the user is not getting updates of SCCM processes. As far as integration, we're working on Tableau with some of our partners. We're working on, oh God, what's it called? ServiceNow, and there's one more. Power BI from Microsoft. Yep, yeah. Power BI. Yep, Power BI from Microsoft. So taking that data from Stratusphere and being able to feed it into your existing business systems. So your ticketing system, your business intelligence system, and we got several partners working with us, and hopefully be posting a lot more of that information. Some of it's already up here. The Power BI integration is actually already on the community site. So if you have Power BI, I think everybody owns it from Microsoft. It comes with the Office license. There's a link in here to actually show you how to turn Power BI on and suck data out of Stratusphere.
All right, great. Someone asked a question about hardware acceleration, and does it impact the user experience or just save resources?
That's a good question. So when you have a good video card, if you get a magnifying glass and look at your monitor, that circle will be almost perfect because there's a hardware acceleration card behind there drawing almost a perfect circle. If you turn off hardware acceleration and you get the same magnifying glass, you will be actually able to see some jagged edges, but the naked eye can't see it. Now, if you're a doctor looking at broken bones or designing a car or things like that, you've got to have a graphics adapter. But for most workloads, graphics adapters are not required. The users won't even notice it. So you turn off hardware acceleration. I work with customers all day long. They turn it off. Their users don't even notice it. They just call them and say, hey, the system's running a little bit faster today. What'd y'all do? They don't even know that they turned off hardware acceleration. Can't even tell it.
All right. Someone asked, Chris, can you recommend how to approach page faults? That's always been the most puzzling of metrics.
Yep. Basically, at the end of the day, soft page faults are in RAM. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Hard page faults, on the other hand, I want to mitigate them and reduce them as much as possible. You cannot stop Windows from paging. So if my user's got 6 gig of RAM and they're constantly in the page file, say more than 5% into the page file, getting a lot of hard page faults, I want to give them more memory to keep them from paging. Now, there are products on the market, some of our competitors that do memory trimming. Okay, if you've got memory trimming turned on, you will always page. Personally, I don't think you should do memory trimming. Should not be engaged until the machine is under duress, around 60-75% utilization. Mm-hmm. So I want to reduce memory paging, if at all possible, because it lowers my disk and CPU overhead, but you can never stop it. But pay attention to hard page faults. Those are the one you're after. You can't stop Windows from paging. I just want to reduce it as much as possible.
We can do some of this with our optimizer feature in there, which we hadn't even touched on today, right? And that's to trim these machines and optimize it. If you think about tools you've seen out in the market that do CPU and RAM optimization, this is exactly what we're doing with Stratusphere. You want to talk a bit about that a little bit as a separate feature that you get with Stratusphere?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, Stratusphere comes with an optimizer, CPU and memory. So imagine, I'm sitting on my machine and I get Google Chrome running. I'm looking at, different websites, maybe watching some Netflix, and then my boss calls and I need to flip back over to the production application. Well, Chrome is still sitting in the background beating the fool out of my machine. Optimizer, only if the machine's under duress does Optimizer do anything. So if the machine's got plenty of CPU, plenty of memory, Optimizer doesn't even engage. And this is just a little checkbox. in the configuration settings for our agent. You just turn it on. That's pretty easy. Maybe tell it to exclude or things like that. But so it will push Chrome down and say, Chrome, now you're below normal. So basically doing task manager. We're basically right-clicking and lower the base priority of Chrome to low. Whatever's in your foreground actually becomes above normal. So your in-focus application is always above normal. It's not going to change the amount of CPU that you use or the memory that you use, but the in-focused application that you're actually clicked on is looked like it's above normal. So a lot of our customers have been able to actually extend the life of their physical machines, 6 months to 18 months. So push out that refresh cycle because the application that's in focused is above normal processing.
Yeah.
It looks brand new.
So this is something relatively new within the last year from Stratusphere, and it's in Stratusphere, and if you're up on the latest versions, it'll be in there. You can use that. So Stratusphere is monitoring diagnostics, except in this case, we're actually taking action, and we're able to, when you activate this, to enhance the user experience for users. And in the accounts that we've used this, we've had phenomenal results and great feedback from customers.
So, Chris, you just mentioned Chrome in that, and there was a question that came in revolving around Chrome, and just asking about, kind of almost that specific use case about different tabs in browsers, wasting resources and whatnot. But one of the things that they asked about was, will it tell what those web addresses are in those tabs going to? And is there any extra installation needed for modules for Chrome to do that?
Yeah, good question. So Internet Explorer has default APIs, very good documented APIs, so we can get all the data from Internet Explorer natively out of the box. Our agent, you just install it, we can get it. Google Chrome, on the other hand, we actually do have a Chrome plugin. It is on the Chrome store, and I can tell what web address they're going to and all that information, how many tabs they have open, but there you do have to have that plugin. Now, if you don't have the plugin, remember I mentioned earlier that I can track individual process communications. So even if you don't have the plugin, I can tell you the remote IP address that Chrome is talking to. It's very scary to see all the things that Chrome.exe is talking to, but even without the plugin, you can go to the Process tab under the Advanced Explorer, find Chrome, and go to the Network Table Details, and then turn on Destination IP address, and you can actually see per process all the things that Chrome is talking to. If I can do a DNS resolution, I'll also show you the DNS lookup, but we try not to slow the machine down to get that data. So look at it by IP address. So there is a plugin for Chrome that will show up in the Chrome browser, in the Browser tab in Stratusphere, or go to the Process tab and you don't have to have that plugin. It's very powerful, but scary at the same time.
All right. So there's been a bunch of questions here, and I'm going to try to kind of meld them all into one and go from there, because I know we're running out of time here. But some people have asked about different competitors and things like that. But I thought maybe it would be a good idea to say what really makes Stratusphere stand out. And I know you have all these use cases here, but what's the kind of parting thing that we want to leave them with? Why Stratusphere is so invaluable?
Yep. So, I mean, I've been around in the industry for a long time. Not going to tell you how old I am, but I've used diagnostic tools, to help customers improve performance, from login time to disk performance, even work with developers. Stratusphere has data across the entire spectrum. So if I load an agent on your workstation and you take it home, I can tell what you're doing on your workstation. Browser, CPU, is the disk overloaded? You're running out of space. Graphics intensity. What's going on in my VDI environment? What's going on in the ESX server environment? The sheer depth and breadth of the Stratusphere data is both its strength and its weakness. And customers tell us all the time there's just too much data. But I say, okay, how would you find this problem if you didn't have this column? So to me, as an engineer, the diagnostic data within inside of Stratusphere is phenomenal because I may not be able to find you the exact problem, but I can point you in the right direction. I've done this with many customers call me up and said, Chris, I'm down. Can you help me? We hop into Stratusphere. In 5 minutes, I found the problem, or at least pointed them in the right direction, told them the things that it was not. So the sheer depth of the data, and we're working to, the drag and drop dashboards to simplify the interfaces in Stratusphere to bubble up that problem. But to me, the sheer adversity of the data that Stratusphere has allows me to solve customers' problems very quickly and very succinctly and prove it. You can't argue with the numbers. This is a networking problem, and here's the data. Show it to the networking guys, period. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Chris. I know there's a bunch of questions we haven't gotten to yet. We'll take all these questions offline and try to follow up with everyone. If in the meantime you want to try to address these questions, you can always feel free to go to the community.liquidware.com. I put that link in the chat window, and feel free to look there for either answers to the questions or go ahead and join the community and ask the questions yourself. I think that's a great resource that we can go ahead and leverage. So with that being said, Jason and Chris, do you guys have anything that you want to end with today?
Jason?
No, I know this was great for a lot of the attendees because, like I said, I saw the numbers. They stuck with us through the question and answers and beyond. And I appreciate you coming on, Chris, and giving us these notes from the field, real world, top 5 problems identified with Stratusphere.
All right. Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you, Chris and Jason, for your time today. Thank all of you for joining us. Just a quick reminder, if you're looking for a copy of the recording, keep an eye on your inbox in the day or so following the event, and we'll send out a link to that recording for you to review, share with a colleague or whatnot. We encourage you to look at some of those different resources, whether it be through our community site, through our website, or any of our customer success stories to see any more of the ideas and some of the different experiences that people have had with Stratusphere in their environments, if that helps you out at all. So thank you for joining us today, and have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.